My name's Eli Carter. I'm 32, a freelance journalist with a knack for chasing stories that don't want to be told. I'd come to Haven's End on a whim, chasing rumors of a disappearance that had haunted the town for decades. The locals called it the Lighthouse Mystery, a keeper who vanished one stormy night in 1985, leaving behind nothing but a locked door and a cold lantern. It was the kind of enigma that could resurrect my faltering career or at least distract me from the mess I'd left behind in Boston. I adjusted my scarf against the biting wind and started up the winding path to the lighthouse. The town below was a patchwork of weathered cottages and fishing boats, its streets quiet except for the occasional cry of a gull. I'd rented a room at the only inn, a creaky place run by a gruff woman named Marjorie who'd warned me to steer clear of the cliffs. "That place is cursed," she'd said, her eyes narrowing. "You'd do well to leave it alone." But I wasn't good at leaving things alone. The lighthouse door was rusted shut, but a sharp tug with my shoulder popped it open. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the faint tang of salt. A spiral staircase twisted upward, its steps groaning under my weight as I climbed. At the top, I found a small room with a cracked window overlooking the sea. Papers were scattered across a wooden desk. Old logs, faded maps, a journal with water-stained pages. I picked it up, my fingers brushing the brittle leather cover. That's when I heard it, a creak from below, sharp and deliberate, like a footstep on the stairs. I froze, my heart thudding in my chest. "Hello," I called, my voice echoing off the stone walls. No answer, just the wind rattling the window pane. I told myself it was nothing. Old buildings made noises, but my pulse didn't agree. I shoved the journal into my bag and started down the stairs, each step a calculated risk on the warped wood. When I reached the bottom, the door was still ajar, the ocean roaring outside. But there, in the dust by the threshold, was a fresh footprint. Not mine. I stepped back, my breath catching. Someone had been here. Someone was watching. The next morning, I sat at a corner table in the town's only diner, nursing a cup of coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. The journal lay open in front of me, its pages filled with cryptic entries from the missing keeper, a man named Thomas Reed. Most of it was mundane, weather reports, supply lists, but toward the end, the tone shifted. "It's out there again," he'd written on October 12th, 1985. "I see in the waves, waiting. I can't sleep." The final entry, dated the night he disappeared, was just 3 words: "I'm not alone." I shivered, though the diner was warm. What had he seen? And why did it feel like his words were reaching across time, tugging at me? "You're the writer, aren't you?" a voice said, pulling me out of my thoughts. I looked up to see a man standing by my table. He was maybe a few years older than me, with sandy hair and eyes the color of the sea after a storm. A faded flannel shirt hugged his broad shoulders, and there was a quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. "Yeah, that's me," I said, closing the journal. "Eli Carter." "Jasper Hale," he replied, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. "I heard you were poking around the lighthouse. News travels fast." He smirked, a dimple flashing in his cheek. "Small town. You're the most exciting thing to happen here since the Lobster Festival." I laughed despite myself. "I'll take that as a compliment." "You should," he said, his gaze lingering on me a beat too long. My stomach did a little flip, and I cursed myself for it. I wasn't here to flirt. I was here to work. But there was something about Jasper, something that made it hard to look away. "You live here?" I asked, steering the conversation back to safer ground. "Born and raised. I run the hardware store down the street. Not exactly glamorous, but keeps the lights on. And you know about the lighthouse?" His smile faded slightly. "Everyone does. Thomas Reed was my uncle. My mom's brother." I sat up straighter. "Wait, seriously?" He nodded. "He was a good guy. Quiet, kept to himself. After he disappeared, people started making up stories. Ghosts, sea monsters, you name it. My mom thinks he just fell into the ocean and the tide took him." "What do you think?" I asked, leaning in. Jasper hesitated, his fingers tapping the table. "I think there's more to it. He wasn't careless. And that footprint you found? It's not the first time someone's seen something odd up there." My pulse quickened. You believe me? I do not believe you, he said carefully. Look, if you're serious about this, I can help. I've got keys to the old storage shed behind the lighthouse. Might be something in there. I studied him, trying to gauge if he was messing with me. But his expression was earnest, his eyes steady. Why would you do that? Maybe I'm curious too, he said with a shrug. Or maybe I just like a good mystery. That afternoon, we met at the lighthouse. The sky was clear, the sea calm, but the air still carried a chill. Jasper unlocked the shed, revealing a clutter of rusted tools, fishing nets, and mildew boxes. We dug through it, dust coating our hands, until I found a metal box tucked in the corner. Inside was a stack of Polaroids, blurry shots of the ocean at night, with strange shapes in the water. Shadows that didn't match the waves. What the hell is this? I muttered, holding one up to the light. Jasper peered over my shoulder, his breath warm against my neck. Looks like he was trying to catch something. Proof, maybe. Of what? No idea, he said, but his voice was tight. Eli, there's something else you should know. My uncle, he wasn't straight. No one talked about it, but I found letters after he was gone, from a guy in Portland. I turned to face him, the Polaroid still in my hand. You're saying he was gay? Yeah, and I think whatever happened to him, it might have been tied to that. Small towns aren't always kind. I swallowed, a mix of empathy and unease settling in my chest. I knew what it was like to hide, to feel the weight of other people's judgment. I'd come out in college, but it hadn't been easy. Even now, in a city like Boston, I felt the occasional sting of a stranger's stare. You okay? Jasper asked, his voice soft. Yeah, I lied, forcing a smile. Just processing. He nodded, and for a moment, we stood there in silence, the Polaroids between us like a bridge to the past. Then he reached out, his hand brushing mine as he took one of the photos. The touch was brief, accidental, but it sent a jolt through me. We should keep looking, he said, clearing his throat. There's more here. We spent the next hour sorting through the shed, finding bits and pieces of Thomas's life. A carved wooden whale, a rusted pocket knife, a faded postcard with no writing. Each discovery felt like a clue, but to what, I couldn't say. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jasper turned to me, his face half-shadowed. Eli, I gotta ask, why this story? Why now? I hesitated, then decided on the truth. I needed a win. My last big piece tanked, and I've been running on fumes. But it's more than that. I feel like Thomas deserves to be heard. Jasper's eyes softened. You're a good guy, Eli. Not always, I said with a wry smile. But I try. He stepped closer, the space between us shrinking. I think you're better than you give yourself credit for. My breath hitched, and before I could overthink it, he leaned in. His lips brushed mine, tentative, searching, and I kissed him back, the taste of salt and pine flooding my senses. It was reckless, unexpected, but it felt right. When we pulled apart, I saw something in his eyes, vulnerability, maybe even fear. I've never done that before, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Not with a guy. I smiled, my heart pounding. First time for everything. But as we stood there, the wind picking up around us, I couldn't shake the feeling that we just stepped into something bigger, something that might swallow us whole. The salty breeze whipped through Haven's End as Jasper and I left the historical society, the mysterious key clutched tightly in his hand. My mind raced with questions, but one thing was clear. Thomas Reed's disappearance was no accident, and the town's silence spoke volumes. The weight of the key, and the secrets it might unlock, hung between us like a fragile thread. Do you think it opens something in the lighthouse? I asked, breaking the silence as we walked down the cobblestone street. Jasper nodded, his jaw tight. There's an old chest in the storage shed. I've never been able to open it. A shiver ran down my spine. Let's check it out. The town was quiet, but I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every glance from a passerby felt loaded, as if they knew something we didn't. Small towns had long memories, and Haven's End was no exception. By the time we reached the lighthouse, the sun had dipped low, casting eerie shadows across the cliffs. We slipped into the shed, and Jasper dragged a heavy wooden chest from beneath a dusty tarp. The lock was rusted, but the key slid in perfectly. My heart pounded as he lifted the lid. Inside, we found a stack of letters tied with twine, a leather-bound journal, and a few faded photographs. The letters were from a man named Michael, each one a glimpse into a hidden love. I wish we could be together openly, one read, but I understand why we can't. The journal was even more intimate. Thomas's neat handwriting filled the pages with reflections on his life, his passion for the sea, and his growing fear. "I think they're watching me," he wrote in one entry. "I heard footsteps outside again last night, but it was the final page that stopped us cold. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. Tell Jasper I'm sorry I couldn't be there for him, and tell the world the truth." Jasper's eyes welled up. He knew something was going to happen to him. I rested a hand on his shoulder, feeling the weight of his grief. We need to find out who was threatening him. Before we could process it, a noise outside made us freeze. Footsteps crunched on the gravel, deliberate and slow. The door creaked open, revealing Jasper's father, his face etched with disapproval. "What you two doing here?" he demanded, his voice like gravel. Jasper stood, clutching the journal. "We're learning about Uncle Thomas, about what really happened to him." His father's eyes narrowed. "Some things are better left in the past." "Not this," Jasper shot back, his voice steady. "He deserves justice." A heavy sigh escaped his father, and for a moment he looked older, wearier. "You don't understand, son. There are people in this town who would rather forget." "Forget what?" I asked, stepping forward. He glanced at me, then back at Jasper. That Thomas was different, that he brought shame to the family. Jasper's fists clenched, his voice trembling with anger. "He didn't bring shame. He was brave, braver than you." The air crackled with tension. I could see the pain in Jasper's eyes, the years of silence and denial weighing him down. His father's words were a stark reminder of the prejudices that still lingered in Haven's End, even now. "We're done here," I whispered to Jasper, tugging his sleeve. "Let's go." As we brushed past his father, I felt a chill settle over me. The truth was out there, buried beneath decades of fear and denial, but digging it up would come at a cost. Later that night, we sat in my rented room at the inn, the journal spread out between us. Jasper traced his fingers over Thomas's words, his expression a mix of sorrow and determination. "I can't believe he went through all this alone," he murmured. "And my family, it just erased him." I leaned closer, our shoulders touching. "You're not alone, Jasper. Not anymore." He looked at me, his eyes searching. "Eli, I don't know if I can stay here after this. If we find out what really happened, it might tear everything apart." "Maybe," I said softly, "but sometimes things need to break before they can heal." He nodded, and in the dim light, I saw something shift in him, a quiet resolve. Whatever came next, we'd face it together. But as I lay awake that night, the waves crashing outside, I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd only scratched the surface. Thomas's final words echoed in my mind. "Tell the world the truth." I just hoped we were ready for what that truth might be. The thunder rumbled again, shaking the frail walls of the boathouse as Eli and Jasper stared at the carving on the wall. A compass rose with the initials TR plus M etched beneath it. The rain pounded relentlessly outside, and the tide was now seeping through the cracks in the floor, pooling around their boots. Eli traced the symbol with his fingers, his mind racing. "This has to mean something. Thomas and Michael. They left this here for a reason." Jasper crouched beside him, his expression a mix of determination and dread. "Maybe it's a marker, a sign they were planning something." Before Eli could respond, the sound of footsteps returned, louder this time, unmistakable over the storm. They both froze, their eyes darting to the doorway. A shadow loomed against the rain-streaked wall, distorted by the flickering light of a lantern. "Who's there?" Eli called, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. The figure stepped inside, and the lantern's glow revealed Old Man Murphy, his face etched with urgency. Water streamed from his coat, pooling on the floor as he shut the door against the howling wind. "Murphy," Jasper said, standing up. "What are you doing here?" I couldn't let it rest. Murphy said, his breath ragged. After you boys left the diner, I kept thinking about Thomas. I saw something that night. Something I didn't tell you. Eli's heart pounded. What did you see? Murphy set the lantern down, casting long shadows across the room. It was during the storm, the night he vanished. I was securing my boat down by the docks when I saw Thomas arguing with a man. Couldn't hear much over the wind, but it looked heated. The other fellow was wearing a hat, a wide-brimmed one, like a sailor's. A sailor's hat? Jasper echoed, his voice tight. Murphy nodded. Aye. And after a bit, they headed this way, toward the boathouse. I figured Thomas was meeting someone, but I didn't stick around to find out. The storm was getting bad. Eli exchanged a glance with Jasper. The pieces were starting to fit together. Did you recognize the man? Murphy shook his head. Too dark, too far away. But he was tall, broad-shouldered, moved like he knew the place. The revelation hung heavy in the air, mingling with the damp and the distant roar of the sea. Eli pulled the watertight box from his bag, opening it to reveal the letters they'd found earlier. He handed one to Murphy, pointing to the desperate words scrawled across the page. Thomas, I can't keep doing this. If we don't leave soon, they'll find out. Meet me at the boathouse on the 15th. We can take the boat and disappear. Michael wrote this, Eli said. They were planning to run away together. But something or someone stopped them. Murphy studied the letter, his brow furrowing. Sounds like they were scared. Maybe that argument I saw was with someone who didn't want them to leave. Jasper's jaw tightened. Someone like my father? Murphy hesitated, then shrugged. Can't say for sure. But your dad never liked Thomas's ways. And he wasn't the only one in town who felt that way. The implication settled over them like a fog. Eli turned back to the carving, his mind piecing together a theory. What if the symbol isn't just a marker? What if it's a clue to where they were going? Jasper frowned. You mean like a direction? Exactly, Eli said, pulling out his notebook and sketching the compass rose. It's pointing northwest. Maybe there's something out there, another place they meant to reach. Murphy scratched his beard. Northwest from here, that'd take you past the cliffs toward the old smuggling coves. Dangerous spot, especially in a storm. Smuggling coves? Jasper asked. Murphy said. Used back in the day by folks running liquor. Not many go there now. Too rocky, too hidden. Eli felt a spark of excitement. That could be it. A perfect place to hide a boat, or themselves. But their planning was cut short by a loud crack from outside, sharper than thunder. The door flew open, slamming against the wall as the wind roared in. Standing in the threshold was Jasper's father, his face a mask of fury, rain dripping from his coat. I told you to leave this alone, he bellowed, stepping inside. His eyes flicked to Murphy, then back to Jasper. And now you're dragging him into it? Jasper stood his ground, his fists clenched. We're not stopping, Dad. Not until we know what happened to Thomas. You think you're honoring him? His father snapped. You're tearing this family apart, digging up things best left buried. Maybe they shouldn't have been buried, Jasper shot back. Maybe Thomas deserved better than being erased. The tension crackled between them, electric as the storm. Eli stepped forward, holding up a hand. Mr. Hale, we found proof Thomas was leaving with someone, Michael. They were scared. Someone stopped them that night. Do you know who? Jasper's father faltered, his anger giving way to something else. Guilt, maybe, or fear. I don't know what you're talking about, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. You were against him, Jasper said quietly. You hated who he was. His father's gaze dropped to the floor, his shoulders slumping. I didn't hate him. I didn't understand. And when he disappeared, I thought it was for the best. For all of us. The admission hung there, raw and heavy. Eli watched Jasper, saw the hurt and resolve warring in his eyes. Did you see him that night? Eli pressed. At the docks or here? Jasper's father shook his head, but his silence spoke louder than words. After a long moment, he turned and walked back into the storm, leaving the door swinging in the wind. Murphy broke the silence. He knows more than he's saying. Always has. Jasper nodded, his voice low. I think so too. The storm raged on, but inside the boathouse, a new determination settled over them. Eli looked at Jasper, then at Murphy. We need to check those coves. If Thomas and Michael were heading there, we might find something, anything, that tells us what happened. Murphy tipped his head. I got a boat. Small, but it'll do once this weather clears. Jasper met Eli's gaze, a silent agreement passing between them. Then it settled. We're not giving up. As the rain battered the walls and the tide rose higher, Eli felt the weight of their mission deepen. The carving on the wall glowed faintly in the lantern light, a beacon in the chaos. Somewhere out there, in the storm-swept coves, the truth was waiting, if they could survive long enough to find it. The storm had left Haven's End battered, but not broken. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, the town emerged from the night's chaos like a shipwrecked survivor, dazed but still standing. Debris littered the streets, fallen branches, shattered shingles, and overturned barrels. The air smelled of salt and damp earth, and the sea, though calmer now, still churned with restless energy. Eli stood on the porch of the inn, sipping weak coffee from a chipped mug, watching the sun paint the sky in streaks of pink and gold. His mind replayed the events of the previous night, the carving in the boathouse, Murphy's story, and the tense confrontation with Jasper's father. Each piece felt like a fragment of a puzzle, but the picture remained maddeningly incomplete. Jasper joined him, his footsteps heavy on the wooden steps. He looked like he hadn't slept, his eyes shadowed and his jaw set. Murphy says the boat's ready, he said, his voice rough. We can head out in an hour. Eli nodded, setting his mug down. You okay? Jasper shrugged, leaning against the railing. Not really. Last night, my dad. I always knew he was ashamed of Thomas, but hearing him say it like that, it's different. Eli reached out, resting a hand on Jasper's arm. He's stuck in his ways, but you're not. You're doing the right thing. Jasper's gaze softened, and for a moment, the weight on his shoulders seemed to lift. Thanks, Eli. I don't know what I'd do without you here. Before Eli could respond, Murphy appeared around the corner, his coat still damp from the night before. Boat's prepped, he called. But we've got a problem. The storm washed out part of the trail to the coves. We'll have to take the long way around. Eli exchanged a glance with Jasper. How much longer? Add an hour, maybe two, Murphy said. And the tide's coming in fast. We'll need to move quick. There was no time to waste. They gathered their gear, flashlights, ropes, a first aid kit, and set off toward the docks. The town was slowly waking up, but the usual bustle was muted, as if the storm had stolen its voice. A few locals eyed them curiously, but no one asked questions. In a place like Haven's End, people knew when to look the other way. The boat was a small fishing vessel, its paint chipped and its engine temperamental. Murphy steered them out of the harbor, the water slapping against the hull as they cut through the waves. The cliffs loomed ahead, their jagged edges softened by the morning light. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that they were sailing into the past, toward a truth that had been buried for decades. As they rounded the headland, the smuggling coves came into view, a series of narrow inlets hidden among the rocks, accessible only by boat or a treacherous cliffside path. Murphy pointed to a small beach tucked between two boulders. That's where we're landing. Watch your step. The rocks are slick. They anchored the boat and waded ashore, the cold water biting at their ankles. The cove was eerily quiet, the only sound the distant cry of gulls and the rhythmic crash of waves. It felt like a place forgotten by time, a perfect hideaway for secrets. Jasper led the way, his eyes scanning the terrain. If they were planning to escape, they'd need a boat. Maybe there's something left behind, a wreck or supplies. They spread out, combing the beach and the surrounding caves. The sand was strewn with driftwood and seaweed, but nothing that screamed clue. Eli was starting to lose hope when Murphy called out from a narrow crevice in the cliff face. Over here. They hurried over, squeezing through the gap into a small cavern. The air was damp, and the walls glistened with moisture. In the center of the space was the remnant of an old rowboat. Half buried in sand, its wood rotted and splintered. Jasper knelt beside it, brushing away the debris. This could be it. Look, there's a name carved here. Eli leaned in, squinting at the faded letters, the mariner's hope. Murphy whistled softly. That was Thomas's boat. He used to take it out for night fishing. Ilyas Pulse Kunkinet. So they made it this far. But why abandon it? Jasper's fingers traced the splintered edge of the hull. Maybe they didn't. Look at this. There's a hole here like it was smashed. Eli examined the damage. The wood was fractured, as if struck by something heavy. You think someone sabotaged it? Or there was a struggle, Jasper said grimly. A chill ran down Eli's spine. The image of Thomas and Michael, desperate and cornered, flashed through his mind. But who had stopped them? And why? Murphy shifted uneasily. There's more. Look at the wall. They turned, and there, etched into the stone, was another compass rose. Identical to the one in the boathouse, but this time with an arrow pointing deeper into the cave. Another clue, Eli whispered. They wanted someone to follow. Jasper grabbed a flashlight. Let's see where it leads. The cave narrowed into a tunnel, the air growing colder as they ventured deeper. The path twisted and turned, and soon they were navigating by the thin beam of light. Eli's heart pounded in his ears, every shadow feeling like a threat. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened into a larger chamber. The space was cluttered with old crates and barrels, relics from the smuggling days, no doubt. But in the center of the room was something that made them all stop in their tracks, a makeshift campsite with a bedroll, a lantern, and a scattering of personal items. Jasper approached slowly, picking up a tarnished pocket watch from the ground. He flipped it open, and his breath caught. This was Thomas's. My grandfather gave it to him. Eli stepped closer, shining his light on the other items. A journal, a few canned goods, and a faded photograph. The photo showed two men standing on a pier, their arms around each other, smiling. One was Thomas, the other, Eli assumed, was Michael. They were hiding here, Eli said softly. But for how long? And why didn't they leave? Murphy cleared his throat. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe someone was watching the coves. Jasper flipped through the journal, his hands trembling. The entries were sporadic, filled with anxiety and hope. We've been here 3 days, one read. The boat's gone, and the tide's too high to swim. Michael thinks we can wait it out, but I'm not sure. I hear voices sometimes, echoing through the caves. The final entry was dated October 20th, 1985, 5 days after the storm. Someone's coming. I don't know who, but they're close. If we don't make it, tell Jasper I love him. Tell him to be brave. Jasper's voice broke as he read the last line. He sank to his knees, the journal slipping from his fingers. Eli knelt beside him, wrapping an arm around his shoulders as he shook with silent sobs. Murphy stood back, his face etched with sorrow. Poor bastards. They never had a chance. But even as they mourned, a new question burned in Eli's mind. Who had been coming for them? And were they still out there, guarding the secret? Suddenly, a noise echoed through the cave. A faint scraping, like footsteps on stone. They froze, listening. The sound grew louder, closer. Someone's here, Murphy whispered, his eyes wide. Eli grabbed the journal and shoved it into his bag. We need to go. Now. They scrambled back through the tunnel, the footsteps behind them growing more distinct. Eli's heart raced as they squeezed through the crevice and onto the beach. The tide had risen, the water now lapping at their knees. Murphy's boat bobbed in the distance, but between them and safety stood a figure, a man in a dark coat, his face obscured by a wide-brimmed hat. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his presence was a clear warning. Jasper's voice was tight with fear. Who is that? I don't know, Eli said, but I don't think he's here to help. The man took a step forward, and in the dim light, Eli caught a glimpse of something metallic in his hand. A gun. Run! Murphy shouted. They bolted toward the boat, splashing through the surf. The man didn't follow, but his gaze burned into them as they climbed aboard and gunned the engine. As they sped away from the coves, Eli looked back, but the figure had vanished into the shadows. They didn't speak until they were safely back in Haven's End, the boat tied to the dock. Jasper's hands were still shaking, and Murphy's face was pale. Who the hell was that? Jasper demanded. Murphy shook his head. I don't know, but I've seen that hat before. It's like the one from the night Thomas disappeared. A cold dread settled in Eli's stomach. You think it's the same person? Could be, Murphy said, or someone who knows what happened. Jasper's eyes blazed with determination. Then we need to find out who he is, and why he's still protecting the secret after all these years. Eli nodded, though a part of him wondered if they were ready for the answers. The truth was close. He could feel it. But so was the danger. And in a town like Haven's End, where memories ran deep and silence was golden, uncovering the past might come at a price they weren't prepared to pay. But as Eli looked at Jasper, his jaw set and his eyes fierce, he knew there was no turning back. For Thomas, for Michael, and for themselves, they had to see this through. Back at the inn, the three of them gathered in Eli's room, the journal spread open on the table. The dim light of a single lamp cast long shadows across the walls, amplifying the tension that hung in the air. Jasper paced, his hands clenched into fists, while Murphy sat slumped in a chair, staring at the floor. We can't just sit here, Jasper said, his voice sharp. That man, he knows something. We need to figure out who he is. Eli flipped through the journal again, searching for anything they might have missed. Thomas wrote about hearing voices in the caves. If someone was watching them, they had to have a reason. Maybe it wasn't just about stopping their escape. Maybe it was personal. Murphy rubbed his face, exhaustion etched into every line. Back then, there were rumors. People said Thomas and Michael crossed the wrong folks, smugglers, maybe, or someone higher up. But no one ever proved anything. Jasper stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. My dad, he knew more than he let on last night. He didn't just want to forget Thomas. He was afraid of something. Eli looked up, meeting Jasper's gaze. You think he knows who was after them? Maybe not who. Jasper said, but why? He's been hiding something all these years. Murphy leaned forward, his voice low. If we're going to confront him, we need to be smart about it. That guy in the coves, he wasn't there by accident. He's watching us now. A shiver ran through Eli. The man's silhouette lingered in his mind, a dark specter tied to the past. We need a plan. We can't just barge in and demand answers. Not with someone out there who's willing to pull a gun. Jasper nodded, his expression hardening. Tonight, we'll go to my dad's place after dark. He won't expect it, and maybe we can catch him off guard. Murphy frowned. And if he clams up again? Or worse, if that guy shows up? Then we'll deal with it, Jasper said, his tone leaving no room for argument. I'm done waiting for the truth to find us. Eli felt a mix of admiration and unease. Jasper's resolve was unshakable, but the stakes were rising fast. The journal, the boat, the compass rose. All of it pointed to a story that someone had gone to great lengths to bury. And now they were digging it up, piece by dangerous piece. All right, Eli said finally. Tonight it is. But we stick together and we watch our backs. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting Haven's End into twilight, the three of them prepared for what lay ahead. Eli tucked the journal into his jacket, its weight a constant reminder of the lives they were chasing and the risks they were taking to uncover them. The mystery of Thomas Reed was no longer just a shadow from the past. It was here, alive and breathing, and it was hunting them as much as they were hunting it. The boat rocked beneath Eli and Jasper as they cut through the inky waters of Haven's End, the night swallowing the town's faint lights behind them. The siren's wail lingered in the distance, a haunting echo that gnawed at Eli's nerves. His hands gripped the oars, knuckles white, as he rowed with a steady rhythm, each stroke pulling them farther from the chaos and closer to an uncertain future. Jasper sat opposite him, his face etched with anguish, staring back toward the shore as if he could will Murphy to emerge from the shadows. We have to go back, Jasper said, his voice raw. We can't just leave him. Elias diest tightened. He wanted to agree, to turn the boat around and storm back to the house, but the gunshot still reverberated in his mind, a single brutal note that could mean only one thing. We don't know what's waiting for us there, he said, keeping his tone firm despite the tremor in his gut. Murphy gave us a chance to get out. We can't waste it. Jasper's eyes flashed with defiance, but he didn't argue. Instead, he slumped forward, burying his face in his hands. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the slap of waves against the hull. Eli's mind raced, replaying the confrontation. Jasper's father's confession about the Guardians of Haven, the man in the hat's cold menace, and that final, deafening shot. They needed answers, now more than ever. But first they needed safety. Where are we even going? Jasper muttered, lifting his head. His voice was hollow, but there was a spark of determination beneath the grief. The coves, Eli said, nodding toward the dark cliffs looming ahead. It's where Thomas hid with Michael. If there's anything left of their story, any clue, it'll be there. And it's the last place that man will look for us tonight. Jasper gave a curt nod, his jaw tightening. Fine. But if Murphy's, he trailed off, unable to finish the thought. We'll find out, Eli promised. One way or another. The boat glided into the shadow of the cliffs, the air growing colder as they neared the coves. Eli steered toward the narrow inlet they'd explored earlier that day, the memory of the mysterious man's watchful gaze sending a shiver down his spine. The tide was low, exposing jagged rocks that gleamed like teeth in the moonlight. He guided the boat carefully, the hull scraping against stone as they slipped into the sheltered cave. Inside, the darkness was absolute, the only sound the drip of water echoing off the walls. Eli fumbled for the lantern stashed beneath the seat, striking a match to bring a faint glow to the space. The light revealed the same scene they'd found before. The makeshift camp with its tattered blanket, the rusted tin of provisions, and the carvings etched into the rock. TR plus MW. Thomas Reed and Michael Ward. A testament to their defiance, their love, and their desperation. Jasper climbed out of the boat, his boots splashing in the shallow water as he approached the carvings. He traced the initials with his fingers, his expression unreadable. They were here, he said quietly. Right here, hiding from the same people who came after us tonight. Eli joined him, setting the lantern on a ledge. Your dad said the Guardians wanted Thomas gone. That man in the hat, he must have been one of them. Maybe their enforcer. Then why is he still here? Jasper asked, turning to face him. If they got rid of Thomas, why stick around all these years? Eli frowned, the question gnawing at him. Maybe they didn't finish the job. Or maybe there's something else he's protecting. Something we haven't found yet. They began searching the cave, the lantern's light casting flickering shadows as they combed through the debris. Eli overturned rocks and sifted through the damp sand, while Jasper pried at the wooden crate they'd overlooked before. It was weathered and splintered, but beneath a layer of grime, he uncovered a small, locked box. Metal, rusted at the edges, with a faint engraving, property of TR. Eli, Jasper called, his voice sharp with urgency. Look at this. Eli hurried over, his pulse quickening as Jasper held up the box. Thomas's, he breathed. Can you open it? Jasper shook his head. It's locked tight. We need a key, or something to break it. Eli glanced around, spotting a jagged stone near the water's edge. Here, he said, grabbing it and handing it to Jasper. Try this. Jasper took the stone and struck the lock once, twice, 3 times. On the third blow, the metal gave way with a groan, the lid springing open. Inside lay a bundle of papers, yellowed with age but preserved by the box's seal. Jasper lifted them carefully, unfolding the top sheet. A letter, written in Thomas's hurried scrawl. To whoever finds this, it began, I don't know how much time I have left. The Guardians know about us, me and Michael. They've threatened to burn the boathouse, to run us out of town, but we won't go quietly. There's proof hidden where they'll never look. If I don't make it, find a ledger in the old mill. It names them all. Every coward who turned on us. Tell the world what they did. Damn. Below the note was a crude map, sketching the coastline and marking a spot near the abandoned mill with an X. Eli's heart raced as he read the words aloud, the pieces falling into place. The man in the hat. He lives by the mill. He's guarding the ledger. Jasper's eyes blazed with a fierce resolve. Then that's where we're going. We get that ledger, we expose them, my dad, the guardians, all of them. But what about him? Eli asked, his voice low. He'll be waiting. Let him come, Jasper said, his tone icy. I'm done running. Eli nodded, feeling the same fire ignite within him. They gathered the papers, tucking them into the journal for safekeeping, and climbed back into the boat. As they rowed out of the cove, the first hints of dawn streaked the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray and gold. The mill lay ahead, a looming silhouette against the light, a place of secrets, danger, and, perhaps, redemption. They didn't speak as they approached the shore, the weight of their mission binding them in silent agreement. Whatever waited at the mill, the man in the hat, the truth about Thomas, or the ghosts of Haven's past, they would face it together. For Thomas. For Murphy. For the justice that had been denied too long. The old mill loomed against the dawn sky, its sagging timbers and broken windows a silent witness to Haven's forgotten past. I rowed the boat in silence, the oars slicing through the water as Jasper sat rigid, his eyes locked on the shore. The air felt thick, heavy with the weight of what we were about to do. My heart pounded, not just from fear, but from the fire that had sparked inside me. We weren't just running anymore. We were fighting back. As we neared the dock, I tied the boat to a rotting post, my hands trembling slightly. Jasper climbed out first, clutching Thomas's journal like it was a lifeline. The map inside pointed us here, to the mill, where the ledger waited, proof of the guardian's sins, a list of names that could unravel everything. I followed him, my boots crunching on the gravel, every sound amplified in the stillness. We stick together, I whispered, my voice barely audible over the rustle of leaves. No matter what. Jasper nodded, his jaw tight. Let's find it and get out. The mill's door hung ajar, creaking as we pushed it open. Inside, the air was musty, thick with the scent of damp wood and decay. Shafts of early light pierced through the cracked roof, illuminating dust motes that danced in the stillness. The floor was littered with debris. Rusted tools, broken crates, and the faint outline of footprints in the dirt. Someone had been here recently. We moved deeper, following the map sketch toward the back of the mill, where an old storage room sat beneath a collapsed stairwell. My eyes darted to every shadow, half expecting the man in the hat to step out, his cold gaze pinning us in place. But the mill was silent, save for the occasional groan of the building settling. There, Jasper said, pointing to a stack of barrels in the corner. The X was near something round. We shoved the barrels aside, revealing a trapdoor beneath, its edges caked with grime. I pried it open with a splintered plank, the hinges screaming in protest. A ladder descended into darkness, and I hesitated, the memory of that gunshot flashing through my mind. Murphy's fate was still a question mark, and I couldn't shake the dread that we were walking into a trap. You first, Jasper said, handing me the lantern. His voice was steady, but his eyes betrayed his fear. I nodded, lowering myself rung by rung, the light casting eerie shadows on the stone walls. At the bottom, I found a small chamber, its air cold and stale. Jasper followed, and together we scanned the space. Against the far wall sat a metal box, its surface pitted with rust but intact. My pulse quickened as I knelt beside it, brushing away years of dust to reveal the initials, TR. This is it. I breathed, my fingers tracing the lock. It was simpler than the one in the cove, and a few sharp blows with the plank snapped it open. Inside lay the ledger, a thick leather-bound book, its pages yellowed but legible. I opened it, and there they were. Names, dates, transactions. A record of bribes, threats, and worse, all tied to the Guardians of Haven. Jasper's father's name stared back at us, scrawled in black ink beside a payment for silencing dissent. Jasper's face hardened as he read it. He didn't just know, he said, his voice low. He paid for it. Before I could respond, a shadow fell across the chamber. I spun around, the lantern's light catching the glint of a gun barrel. The man in the hat stood at the trapdoor's edge, his silhouette framed by the dim light above. His face was half hidden beneath the brim, but his eyes were sharp, unyielding. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice a gravelly drawl. He descended the ladder slowly, each step deliberate, the gun trained on us. "That book stays buried." I stepped in front of Jasper, my heart hammering. "It's over," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "We know what you did, what the Guardians did. Thomas, Michael, all of it." He smirked, a cold, humorless twist of his lips. "You think you could just waltz out of here with that? This town's got rules, boy. Rules you don't break." "Then why keep it?" Jasper snapped, his anger breaking through. "If it's so dangerous, why not burn it?" The man's smirk faded, replaced by something darker. "Insurance," he said. "Leverage. You don't survive in Haven without holding a few cards." I glanced at Jasper, a plan forming. We couldn't fight him. Not with that gun, but we could outsmart him. "You're alone now," I said, taking a small step forward. "The Guardians are old, scattered. Who's left to care about your leverage?" His grip on the gun tightened, but I saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Jasper caught my signal, inching toward the ladder. "You're just a relic," I pressed, keeping his focus on me. "This town's moved on. You're guarding nothing." For a moment, he wavered, his gaze darting between us. Then Jasper lunged, slamming the trapdoor shut above him. The man whirled, firing a shot that ricocheted off the stone, the sound deafening in the confined space. I grabbed the ledger and bolted for the ladder, shoving it open as Jasper scrambled up behind me. We burst into the mill, the man's shouts echoing below. The boat was our only chance, and we sprinted for it, my lungs burning as we hit the dock. I untied the ropes with shaking hands, pushing off just as the man emerged, his gun raised. A shot cracked through the air, splintering the wood beside me, but we were already moving, the current pulling us away. Jasper clutched the ledger, his breath ragged. "We've got it," he said, a wild grin breaking through his fear. "We've actually got it." I nodded, steering us toward the open water. The man stood on the shore, a dark figure shrinking in the distance. But I knew this wasn't the end. The ledger was a weapon, but it came with a target on our backs. And Murphy. God, I hoped he was still out there, waiting for us to finish what we'd started. As the sun climbed higher, bathing Haven's end in gold, I felt the weight of our choice settle in. We could expose the truth, tear down the lies that had festered here for decades. But what cost? The mill faded behind us, its secrets no longer buried, but the fight was just beginning.